My name is Mary. I live here in Texas. I lived until the age of 77. Throughout my life, I went through difficult near-death experiences, but Jesus saved me every time. My story is full of emotion and care. Despite the hardships, I overcame them through the love of Jesus. I was called by Jesus at the age of 77, and those years were well lived. No one is better suited to tell of my deliverance from near death than Jesus Christ, my Savior.
I am Jesus Christ. I am the beginning and the end, the author of life and the one who holds every heartbeat in my hands. This is the story of Mary, a daughter I loved before the foundations of the world were laid. She was born in Texas, where the storms rage, but my voice is louder still. Throughout her life, death came for her many times, quietly, violently, suddenly, but I stood between her and the grave again and again, not because she was perfect, but because she was mine. She did not see me with her eyes, but I was there, in the fire, in the flood, in the silence, in the noise. Even when she doubted, even when she wandered, I never left her side. She faced pain, heartbreak, danger, and darkness, but death never touched her until the very day I had written. And on that day she did not die. She came home. This is our story. This is the journey of Mary, and the 7 times I saved her life. I remember the moment the winds began to gather over the small town in Texas where Mary was about to be born. The sky darkened like a warning, and the clouds churned with fury, but I was already there. Long before the first gust of wind shook the windows of that modest hospital, I had already whispered peace into her mother's womb. You see, nothing catches me by surprise. Not storms, not sorrow, not even the cries of a newborn in the middle of chaos. Outside, trees bent low as if in prayer, and sirens howled in the distance, calling people to shelter. But in that delivery room, I stood in silence between life and death, watching over my daughter's arrival. Nurses rushed, panic thick in the air, yet there was a calm that hovered just above the fear, my calm. Mary's mother clenched her hands and called out to me, not knowing how closely I stood beside her. Her strength was faltering, but I strengthened her. Her breath was shallow, but I filled her lungs. The power flickered and vanished, plunging the hospital wing into darkness. Doctors fumbled with flashlights, and somewhere in the building, a baby's cry broke through the noise. But not Mary's. She had not yet breathed her first breath. The storm outside raged like a living thing, pressing against the walls as if it too wanted to witness this birth. I could feel the tension in the room shift, fear rising like a tide. But I was not afraid. I'd already written this chapter. Her tiny heart, still inside the womb, began to slow. Machines beeped frantically. A nurse whispered, "We're losing her." But no, they were not. Because I had chosen this day, not for death, but for life. I leaned close, wrapped my hand around that flickering rhythm, and spoke gently to her spirit. "Not yet, little one. You are not alone." In that moment, her heart surged with new strength, and Mary kicked for the first time with force that made the doctor widen his eyes. When she finally entered the world, it was not with a soft whisper, but with a cry that pierced through the storm. That cry echoed into eternity. It told every dark thing it could not have her. It told the world she had arrived and that she was mine. Rain beat against the windows, thunder rolled through the sky, and yet there she was, wrapped in trembling arms, blinking in the dim light, alive against all odds. The storm had not won. It never had a chance. Many will say it was a coincidence, that tornadoes change direction, that babies survive difficult births every day. They will offer science, reason, probability. But I know the truth because I stood in the space between one heartbeat and the next. I held her story in my hands, and on that page, death had no line. That storm, mighty as it was, bowed to something greater, my will for her life to begin. Her mother looked down at her, tears streaming down her cheeks, and whispered, "Thank God. She didn't know that I was smiling right there beside her, watching my daughter's chest rise and fall for the first time. And though she would face many storms in her life, some even more violent than this one, I marked her that day. I placed my protection over her like a shield, not to keep her from all pain, but to make sure death would never come before its time. Even as an infant, Mary was part of something eternal. The world would call her ordinary, but to me, every breath she took was a miracle threaded through divine purpose. I knew the battles she would face. I knew the days when she would feel forgotten, and the nights she would cry out wondering if I was still near. I knew all of it, and still I chose to breathe life into her lungs that day, because I don't abandon my own. You see, when I save someone, it's not just for the moment, it's for the story I am writing in them, page by page, breath by breath. That storm was never stronger than my love. It was never more powerful than my plan. It only made her beginning more beautiful, because light shines brighter when it breaks through darkness. And Mary's story was always meant to shine. And so the wind died down, the clouds rolled away, and the world moved on, unaware that a war had just been won in the quiet shadows of a hospital room. But I remember. I always remember the moments when my daughters are born, beneath the sound of thunder, and I whisper into their soul, "You were never meant to die today. You were made to live, for so much more." She was 6 years old when the fire came. Not the kind that burns from candles or warms a cold home, but the kind that races across dry grasslands like a wild thing with no master. It began with a single strike of lightning in the distance, unnoticed by most, swallowed by the heat of a Texas summer afternoon. But I saw it. I knew where Mary was, barefoot and laughing, chasing butterflies just beyond her grandfather's old fence line. She thought she was alone in the tall grass, but I walked beside her unseen. The sun was low in the sky when the first flames rose behind her, small and silent. There was no crackle yet, no roar to warn her, just heat. And in that moment, all of heaven held its breath. I knew how quickly the fire would move. I knew how close she was to the edge of the field, and how far she was from anyone who could hear her cry. But I was never far. I am never far. She turned around, and her smile vanished. The flames had grown suddenly, hungrily, fed by the dry wind that swept across the open land. Her small hands trembled. She didn't run at first. Children don't always understand danger right away. But then the fire cracked loud like thunder, and she screamed. That scream tore through the air and reached me, though I had never left her side. And in that moment, I moved. The heat intensified. Smoke clouded her vision. Her legs stumbled in the uneven grass as panic set in, and she began to cry out, not knowing where to go. The path she had come from was already swallowed by flames. To the left, more fire. To the right, thorns and brush. But I made a path in the middle of it all, one only she could see. I whispered into her spirit, and her feet turned toward safety, not by logic, not by map, but by divine instinct I had placed deep within her since the day she was born. She ran, tears cutting streaks through the ash on her face, guided by something she couldn't explain. Later, she would say she felt someone near her, someone golden, someone peaceful, someone who knew her name without her ever saying it. She wasn't wrong. I took on a form she could understand, a presence that didn't terrify her but calmed her racing heart. And when she nearly collapsed from exhaustion, I carried her the rest of the way. The fire tried to outrun her, but I slowed it. Flames curled and hesitated, as if confused, as if something greater stood between them and the child they longed to consume. Because something did. I did. And when she finally broke through the field and stumbled into her grandfather's arms, her knees scraped, her face streaked with soot, I stood behind her in the smoke, and the wind turned to scatter the flames. No one could explain how the fire stopped just feet from the barn, how it split instead of spreading, how the girl no one saw leave the yard managed to find her way through a burning field without a single burn on her skin. But I could explain it. I didn't just save her from the fire. I wrote the fire into the story so I could show her that even in flames she was not forgotten. Her mother held her tight that night, kissing the top of her smoke-scented hair, whispering thanks to heaven. And though Mary didn't have words for what she had seen, she dreamed of golden light and strong arms and peace that made her feel safe when the world around her burned. She wouldn't remember every detail, but her soul would. It would carry that memory like a quiet flame, one not meant to destroy, but to warm her heart with wonder. I did not promise her a life without fire. No, my children walk through many flames. But I promised to be the fourth man in every furnace, the voice in every smoke, the presence in every fear. I promised she would never burn beyond what I could restore. And I kept that promise that day in the field. The wind returned to stillness, the smoke faded, and the earth calmed once more. But something eternal had happened in the hidden place between her cries and my rescue. Something sacred. And though she would face many more fires, that day became a seed of faith planted deep in her spirit, a seed that would grow and bloom in moments she had yet to imagine, because her story was only beginning. She was 13 when the water came for her. It was supposed to be a simple summer day, laughter echoing through pine trees, the smell of sunscreen and picnic food lingering in the air. Mary had come with her youth group to a lake just outside of Austin, where the water glittered under a sky that promised nothing but warmth. She was quiet that day, thoughtful, standing at the edge of the water with her feet in the mud, watching ripples move like secrets across the surface. No one knew the ache she carried in her chest, not even she could name it. But I knew. When she stepped into the water, it wasn't with fear. It was with the innocence of a girl, still learning how fragile life can be. She swam out further than she usually dared, letting herself float on her back, eyes closed, arms open like wings. For a moment, she felt free. And then, without warning, the undercurrent shifted. It was subtle at first, a tug at her ankle, a pulling beneath the calm. But it grew fast, too fast. Mary thrashed, confusion replacing peace. The lake had turned on her. Her feet searched for the bottom and found nothing. Her head dipped below the surface once, twice, and then panic exploded inside her like thunder. Her lungs screamed for air. The sun above turned into a blur. Laughter still rang from the shore, but no one saw her hands slip beneath the waves. Not yet. I saw. I always see. The water pulled her down, wrapping around her like a silent tomb. Her strength was gone. She stopped kicking. Her heart cried out, not with words, but with desperation. And that was enough. I don't need eloquence. I respond to surrender. In the moment she gave up, I reached in. She never saw my face, but she felt something grip her, not rough like the water, but steady, sure. I lifted her gently, carefully, until her face broke the surface with a gasp so deep it startled the wind itself. No lifeguard had seen her. No friend had called her name, and yet she was rising. Her body drifted back toward the shore, almost carried, though no hand touched her from the outside. When she opened her eyes, coughing and trembling, she found herself lying at the edge of the lake, surrounded by reeds, staring up at a sky that now looked impossibly blue. People ran toward her, shouting, asking what happened, how she had gotten back. She couldn't answer, not really, because what had saved her wasn't from the shore. Later, she told someone she had felt hands beneath her, warm, strong and kind, when there was no one near. She wondered if it had been an angel. It was me. I don't always speak through thunder or visions. Sometimes I just catch my children when they fall. The others dismissed it quickly. She probably just drifted, they said. She's lucky, but I don't deal in luck. I deal in purpose. And every breath she took after that moment was written in my book. That water had no right to take her, because her time had not yet come. and I will never allow death to steal what I have claimed." Mary never looked at water the same way again. She carried a quiet reverence for it, not fear but memory, and though she didn't tell many about what she felt that day beneath the surface, she never forgot. Because that moment marked her. It told her soul what her mind couldn't grasp yet. I am near, even in silence, even in drowning, even in darkness. The sun dried the water from her skin, but the miracle remained, soaked deep into her spirit. And while she walked back to her friends, laughing softly, trying to return to normal, I stayed beside her, smiling, invisible, and whispering into her soul, "You are still mine. I'm not finished with you yet." She was 21 when the road grew dark and lonely. It was just past midnight, and Mary had been driving for hours, returning home from a college visit that had run longer than expected. Her phone battery had died, the GPS had gone silent, and the familiar Texas roads turned foreign in the deep black of night. She was tired, too tired to think clearly, her eyes heavy, her thoughts tangled with the noise of unanswered questions about her future, her worth, her direction. But I was with her, even in her silence. When the warning light blinked on her dashboard, she let out a tired sigh. Low fuel. She pulled off the highway at the next exit and found a small gas station, deserted, half-lit, a flickering sign casting a blue glow across cracked pavement. There were no other cars, no attendants, just shadows and silence. But she didn't feel afraid. Not yet. Not until a man stepped out from behind the building, as if waiting. He walked toward her slowly, hands in his pockets, eyes fixed on her face like he already knew her. She froze. Her heart pounded against her ribs. Every instinct screamed to get back in the car, but her tank was empty, and she told herself not to overreact. Maybe he just wanted to help. Maybe this was nothing, but I knew it wasn't. I saw what lay inside his heart. I saw the darkness that lived behind his calm voice and quiet smile. And I would not allow him to touch her. He offered to pump her gas. His voice was soft, polite, but it trembled with a lie. Mary tried to decline, but he stepped closer. Too close. Her hands shook as she fumbled for her wallet, trying to stay calm, trying to think. Her voice caught in her throat as she asked him to leave her alone. He didn't listen. But before she could take another breath, I stepped in. From the far end of the parking lot, headlights flared. A car pulled in, a beat-up white sedan, engine sputtering, radio blaring gospel music. An elderly woman stepped out, wrapped in a floral sweater, her grey hair tied back in a bun. She looked right at the man and said, "That's enough." Her voice was low, firm, and carried something more than authority. It carried my presence. The man stiffened, his charm evaporating. He muttered something under his breath and walked away, disappearing behind the building, never to be seen again. The woman turned to Mary and smiled. "You don't have to be afraid," she said, gently patting her shoulder. "You're not alone tonight." She helped Mary fill her tank, paid with her own card, and stayed beside her until the car door was shut and locked. And then, as Mary turned to thank her, she was gone. No car, no footsteps, no trace. Just the soft echo of a gospel chorus fading into the air. Mary sat in her car, hands trembling, eyes wide, not knowing whether to cry or shout or pray. But I heard her whisper. "Was that you?" she asked into the dark. And I smiled. Yes, it was. I had wrapped myself in the form of a stranger to protect her from what never should have touched her. Because I do not just save lives, I interrupt evil, I rewrite endings, I step in when no one else sees. She drove the rest of the way home in silence, but something inside her had shifted. She knew now, without doubt, that someone was watching over her. Not just in church pews or morning prayers, but in parking lots and gas stations and empty roads, in danger, in darkness. In the places where most believe I am absent, Mary didn't tell many people about the woman. She feared they wouldn't believe her. But that didn't matter, because she believed. And belief, true belief, is the soil where miracles grow. That night didn't end with fear. It ended with a truth etched into her soul. I am never truly alone. My life is not unguarded. And so she drove on, the stars above shining a little brighter, her heart a little stronger. And I remained close, whispering again and again into the stillness of her spirit. Your time has not come. I am still writing your story. Stay with me. She was 32 when metal nearly met metal and time nearly stopped. It was a rainy Friday afternoon, the kind that feels heavy and restless all at once. Mary had left work late, her mind full of deadlines and unfinished conversations. The clouds hung low over the highway, grey and swollen, dripping steady rain that blurred the world into streaks of motion. She turned up the wipers, gripped the wheel tighter, and pressed forward, unaware of what was coming toward her from the opposite lane. She couldn't have seen it. No one could. A semi-truck just ahead lost control. Its tires caught a slick patch of oil, invisible beneath the rain. The driver fought it, but the weight was too great. The trailer began to slide, swinging wide into Mary's lane with the force of a tidal wave. She was less than 100 feet away. There was no shoulder to veer into, no space to escape, and in that split second, death reached for her. But so did I. I had been riding beside her all along, quiet and steady, listening to the beat of her heart and the prayer she hadn't even spoken aloud. She was tired that day, more than usual, tired in a way that reached her soul. She had asked me that morning in a whisper while brushing her hair, "Are you still with me?" I had not answered in words. I was waiting for this moment. The trailer spun toward her like a wall, like the end. But before impact could come, I moved. The rain slowed, time bent. I placed my hand between steel and skin, between the force of death and the story I was still writing. And in a blink that she would never be able to explain, the truck's wheels found sudden traction. The trailer jolted back into place, narrowly missing her car by inches that should not have existed. Her car didn't swerve, she didn't brake. There was no time for reaction, and yet she was untouched. The vehicles passed each other as if guided by invisible rails, the roar of the semi fading behind her like a shadow that never landed. Mary gasped, gripping the wheel, her heart hammering in her chest, her eyes wide with the realization that she should not have survived. But she did. She pulled to the side of the road, hands trembling, the world spinning too fast. Tears welled in her eyes, and a sob escaped her lips before she could hold it back. "That was you," she whispered. And yes, it was. I had never left her. Not in her questions, not in her weariness. Not even in the silence, especially not in the silence. I did not promise her a life without danger. I promised her my presence in every close call, every silent miracle, every breath she never realized was grace. And in that moment, on the side of a wet Texas highway, she began to understand just how fiercely I guard those I call mine. She didn't need to know the physics. She didn't need to make sense of how the truck moved the way it did. She only needed to remember this. She was still breathing. Mary sat in her car for a long time that day, the rain softening to a mist, the traffic slowly returning to its usual rhythm. But something inside her had changed. A deeper awareness had taken root. She had seen my hand, felt my protection, survived what never should have spared her, and her soul knew it. That night, she didn't talk about her near miss. Not at dinner, not on the phone, but she prayed, more honestly than she had in months. She thanked me for another day, another chance, another breath, and I leaned close, placing my peace like a blanket over her restless heart, whispering once again, "I'm not done with you yet." Because I wasn't. I'm still not. She was 35 when a whisper of death tried to write itself into her story. It began with a dull ache beneath her ribs, something she ignored for weeks because deadlines seemed louder than discomfort, because caring for others felt more urgent than caring for herself. Yet the pain grew, pressing against her courage, until fear finally drove her to a sterile room of white coats and fluorescent lights. I was already there, watching the clock on the wall, counting each anxious heartbeat, placing my calm against the rising tide of dread in her chest. The scans lit up like night skies peppered with unwelcome constellations. Words like aggressive and inoperable slid across the doctor's desk, heavier than any diagnosis Mary had imagined at the start of the week. She nodded, polite and composed, but inside her soul quaked. When she stepped outside into the parking lot, the wind felt colder, harsher, as if the world had shifted 1 degree toward winter. She gripped the steering wheel and let silent tears fall, asking into the emptiness, "Are you still writing my tomorrows?" I answered in the language of presence rather than syllables. While she slept that night, I drew near, closer than breath. I traced every scar on her spirit and reminded the darkness it could not claim what I had already redeemed. She dreamed of light, pure, unbroken light, pouring through the cracks of a cracked cathedral, and in that dream she heard my voice say only this, "Hold on to me." She woke before sunrise with swollen eyes and the smallest ember of hope refusing to extinguish. The weeks that followed became a wilderness of appointments and hushed conversations. Mary moved through corridors that smelled of antiseptic and apprehension, clutching test results like fragile glass. Friends brought casseroles and scriptures, some brought silence because words felt insufficient, yet every time terror surged, I breathed steadiness into her lungs. When her knees buckled in a bathroom stall, I lifted her. When her thoughts spiraled toward final goodbyes, I whispered futures she could not yet see. One midnight, exhaustion pinned her to the living room floor. Prayer journals scattered like leaves around her. She wept, not a quiet, composed weeping, but a storm of grief and surrender colliding. That was the sound the heavens had been waiting for. I knelt beside her, unseen yet unmistakable, and covered her with a peace that ran deeper than the diagnosis printed in black ink. In that sacred hush, cells obeyed a higher command, and stories hidden deep in her marrow began to rewrite themselves according to grace. Morning brought retesting because procedures demanded proof even when miracles had already taken root. Machines hummed, screens flickered, professionals frowned at contradictions between what they expected and what appeared. The cancer they had charted so meticulously was no longer there. No mass, no shadow, not even the faint outline of a threat. Results traveled from one office to another like rumors of something impossible, and each puzzled specialist repeated the same cautious phrase, "We must have made an error." Mary listened, tears sliding warm across her cheeks, and I smiled beside her. There was no error, only intention. I had not merely erased a sickness, I had carved a monument to mercy inside her. She walked out of that building lighter than she entered, carrying paperwork stamped clear, but the real document was etched on her heart, a testament that darkness yields when I decree light. The news spread quietly at first, a ripple among family, a ripple through church pews, then wider until strangers sent letters saying her story ignited their own flickering hope. Some credited new technology, some credited luck. Mary knew better. She sat beneath an oak tree one dusk, hands folded, head bowed, and said, "Thank you for holding my life when I could not." I answered with a breeze that rustled the leaves above her. The same leaves that had witnessed her childhood games and teenage prayers, now applauding her resurrection. Yet this chapter did not mark an end, it marked a doorway. She carried the memory of those white-walled rooms wherever she went, not as trauma, but as a lantern to lift in other people's valleys. When she met souls trembling under diagnoses of their own, she did not offer clichés, she offered presence, the same gift I had given her. And in each conversation, each hospital visit, each bedside vigil, she felt me beside her, reminding her that miracles are seeds meant to be sown, not souvenirs to be shelved. So life pressed on, ordinary days painted with extraordinary gratitude. Mary laughed louder, prayed wider, dreamed further than before, because she understood something most never grasp until their last breath. Every sunrise is a love letter signed by my hand. And I, the author who had penned deliverance into her very DNA, continued turning pages, whispering promises of chapters still to come, chapters death would read but never write. She was 48 when evil walked through the front doors of the church she loved. It was a Sunday like so many others, songs rising like incense into the rafters, hands lifted in worship, children whispering in pews, and Mary seated on the third row from the front, eyes closed, heart soft. She had come not for answers that morning, but simply to be near me, to rest in my presence and pour out thanks that still poured from her soul like a steady stream. But while her voice lifted in praise, danger crept through the back, cloaked in silence and loaded with destruction. He came in with the intent to kill. The man was young, angry, and broken in ways even he couldn't understand. He'd lost things, people, hope, peace, and the bitterness had metastasized into something that now pulsed behind his ribs like fire. In his coat, beneath trembling hands, was a weapon. He did not come for me, but I came for him, and I came for Mary, because she was mine, and I will not allow death to steal what I have claimed. She didn't see him at first. No one did. The sanctuary was still wrapped in the comfort of worship when he took his first steps down the aisle, hand twitching near the concealed gun, heart beating like a war drum. Mary was mid-song when I prompted her spirit, soft but urgent. She opened her eyes. Her breath caught. She saw him. She didn't scream. She didn't run. She simply prayed, in a whisper only I could hear, "Jesus, cover us." And in that moment, heaven moved. I commanded angels to surround that room, warriors in armor brighter than lightning, unseen by human eyes but known in the spirit. The air shifted, the atmosphere thickened. The gunman stepped forward, but his vision blurred, his grip weakened. He blinked and saw the congregation distorted, as though a veil had fallen over the room. Confused, he stumbled sideways. The gun dropped, clattering to the floor between pews, before he could even draw it. A retired officer in the back had seen just enough. He moved quickly, calmly, disarmed the man, and restrained him until help came. The congregation was safe. Not a single shot fired, not a single life lost. And yet every soul in that room knew something more had happened, something holy, something unexplainable. Mary sat motionless, tears streaming silently down her cheeks. It wasn't fear, it was reverence. She had felt my presence surround her like a fortress. She had seen my hand stop what should have been unstoppable. She had tasted my protection in the most ordinary of places, in the middle of wooden pews and coffee breath prayers. Later, when the church gathered to pray for the man who'd come to kill, Mary knelt first. She prayed not just for safety, but for the soul of the one who never knew what he was truly seeking. She understood now more than ever. Evil is not always hatred, it is hunger twisted in the dark. And love is the only light that disarms it. News of the incident spread, but no headlines could capture what truly happened. They called it quick thinking, miraculous timing, a failed attempt. But I knew the truth. It was another page I had already written, another death I had denied permission, because Mary's breath still belonged to me. And I had more for her to do. She continued to serve that church, not with fear, but with renewed fire. She sang louder. She hugged longer. She prayed deeper. She looked every visitor in the eye as if to say, "I see you, you matter." because she knew what it meant to be protected by invisible arms, to be hidden in plain sight by the God who sees all. That Sunday became a memorial, not to violence but to victory, a testimony not of what almost happened but of what never did. And as Mary walked through each following day, she carried the echo of my promise. No weapon formed against you shall prosper, not now, not ever. Not while I am your covering, because I still wasn't finished with her story. She was 59 when the skies turned black without warning. Texas is no stranger to storms, but this one didn't feel like the others. The wind carried more than dust that afternoon. It carried dread. Sirens wailed across counties. Warnings lit up every screen. People rushed to basements, to closets, to whatever shelter they could find. And Mary, just finishing lunch in her small farmhouse outside Waco, looked up to see clouds twisting like serpents above her. She'd weathered many things in her life: grief, loss, silence, uncertainty. But this storm, it felt personal. It moved too fast. It bent trees like paper. It shook the windows with a violence that made her whisper my name before she even understood why. And as she stood there in her kitchen, watching power lines sway like reeds in the wind, I whispered back, "Go to the hallway. Bring your Bible." She obeyed without hesitation. That's the kind of faith she had grown into. Not a loud faith, but a deep one. She took the old, worn Bible from the table, the one stained with coffee and covered in underlines, and knelt down between two walls, just as the wind screamed over her roof. I was already there, waiting. Outside, the storm came with fury. A confirmed tornado touched down just miles from her home, swallowing barns, snapping trees, tossing cars like toys. Neighbors cried out. Power went dark. Roads vanished beneath debris. It tore a path like a beast unleashed, and on every screen it was the same word: catastrophic. But in that hallway, wrapped in prayer and presence, Mary sat unmoved, because I was holding the storm by the throat. I had not promised her life without weather, but I had promised her shelter that no roof could provide. So as the tornado carved a scar across the land, it passed her house, not above it, not through it, but around it. Just feet from her door, the winds split, as if repelled by something invisible, something sacred. My angels had formed a wall, and nature itself obeyed. When silence finally returned, Mary emerged to find her yard littered with broken limbs and battered leaves, but her house untouched. The neighbor's fence was gone. The trees across the street had fallen, but her windows still held, her roof was still strong, her peace had not cracked. She stepped outside, barefoot in the mud, and whispered with awe, "You covered me again." And yes, I had. Because storms may come, but they answer to me. And when I say not her, the wind knows to turn. Word spread quickly through town. People drove by her property just to marvel. "It doesn't make sense," one said. "It skipped you." She smiled quietly, not needing to explain what only faith can recognize. What skipped her wasn't luck. It was grace. What shielded her wasn't science. It was me. That evening she opened her Bible again and read aloud the words she had once underlined in younger years. "He will cover you with his feathers, and under his wings you will find refuge." She knew then that it wasn't just a metaphor. It was a memory now, etched into her bones. And in the days that followed, Mary didn't speak of fear. She spoke of the presence that sits in hallways, that stills storms, that draws near when the world shakes. She cooked meals for neighbors whose homes had been damaged. She prayed over strangers who were still trembling, and when they asked, "Why was your house spared?" she simply said, "Because I belong to someone who still commands the wind." I watched her that week, stronger than ever, faith shining like a lantern in a town that needed hope. And I leaned close again and whispered what she already knew by now. Your time has not come. I still have more for you. The winds know your name, but they also know mine. And while I walk beside you, not even the storm dares to claim what I have sealed." Because Mary's story wasn't finished. Not yet. She was 68 when her heart betrayed her. It started quietly, like so many of her battles, with no fanfare, no warning. Just a tightness in her chest one evening while folding laundry, a fluttering discomfort that made her pause and place a hand over her heart. She sat down on the edge of her bed, trying to steady her breath, hoping it would pass. It didn't. Her body began to tremble. Her vision blurred. She reached for her phone but dropped it. Panic started to rise, and her lips only managed to whisper one name: mine. That was enough. Before her heart could surrender, I surrounded her. Before it could stop, I spoke life back into it. Time slowed, and I bent close, pressing my hand against the very rhythm I myself had placed within her before she was even born. I would not let it end there. That was not the breath I had numbered for her final one. I had more to say through her, more lives for her to touch, more days for her to carry the testimony already etched into her soul. She collapsed sideways onto the floor, but I softened the fall. Neighbors heard a faint thump and the bark of her dog, and something stirred inside one of them like an alarm bell. He grabbed his keys and rushed next door without knowing why. I had sent him. He found her pale and unresponsive, but still breathing. Barely. He called for help, and emergency responders arrived in minutes. What they saw confused them. Her heart had slipped into arrhythmia that should have ended her life, and yet she clung to it. Not out of her own strength, but because I was holding the pulse. In the ambulance, they shocked her chest. Monitors screamed, and hands moved with urgency. I was there, watching every movement, whispering to her spirit, "Stay with me. We're not finished." She couldn't speak, but she heard me. Even when her body faded in and out of consciousness, her spirit leaned toward my voice like a flower toward the light. At the hospital, doctors ran tests, gave medication, brought her back to stability, but none could explain how she survived those critical minutes alone on the floor. They called it a narrow escape, a miracle of timing. But I knew better. It wasn't timing. It was sovereignty. She opened her eyes in the ICU with a monitor beeping beside her and sunlight breaking through the window. She didn't ask what happened. She didn't cry. She simply whispered again, "Thank you, Jesus," and smiled, weak but steady. That smile lit up heaven. In the days that followed, they placed a small device in her chest to regulate her heartbeat, a tool man designed, but I had already scripted every beat it would protect. Mary walked slower after that, but her spirit danced freer. There's something powerful about living through the night that should have taken you. She knew the value of every sunrise more than ever now. She breathed with purpose. She spoke with weight. Every "I love you" became a declaration, every prayer a fire. People asked how she stayed so calm. She said, "Because I know who holds my heart." And she meant it, literally. I had held it, wrapped it in mercy, and rewound it like a clock that still had hours left to ring. She began to visit others, recovering from heart attacks and strokes. She knew what to say. She knew how to sit in silence that didn't need to be filled. She carried peace into hospital rooms, like a lantern against the dark. Not because she feared death, but because she had seen me in the space between life and eternity, and she had come back stronger. That night, her heart should have stopped became a bookmark in her life, a reminder that even the most fragile rhythm can become a symphony in my hands. And though her pace had changed, her purpose had only grown, because Mary still had one last chapter. And I was preparing her for it, one heartbeat at a time. She was 77 when I came to bring her home. The day had no thunder, no storm, no warning. The sky over Texas was quiet, painted in soft gold. and the air moved gently through the trees outside her window. She had lived well, loved deeply, laughed often, wept honestly, and believed fiercely. Her Bible lay on the nightstand, pages worn thin from years of whispers, prayers, and tears. Her room was filled with peace, and so was she. That morning she had greeted the sun like she always did, with gratitude. She brewed her tea, watered the flowers by the window, and hummed the old hymn she'd always loved, "Great is thy faithfulness." Her body had slowed over the years, but her spirit remained sharp, clear, expectant. She felt something different in the stillness of that morning, a tug in her soul, a softness in the air that felt familiar, holy. She didn't name it, but she knew. I was near. As she sat in her favorite chair, surrounded by family photos and handwritten prayers tucked into books, her breath deepened. She wasn't afraid. She wasn't sick. She wasn't in pain. She was simply ready. Not because she longed to escape the world, but because she had completed what I had written for her to do. Every appointment, every miracle, every word she had spoken in my name, it had all echoed into eternity. Nothing had been wasted. I stepped into the room, not with thunder, not with fire, but with the same voice that had called her name since childhood. She saw me before her eyes ever closed. Her spirit leapt before her body let go, and I took her hand. She smiled one last time, exhaled once more, and crossed from the temporal into the eternal, with no fear, no pain, only wonder. Heaven stood still as she arrived. Angels lined the gates, not because she was famous, but because she had been faithful. They had followed her story with awe. Every near-death moment, every whispered prayer, every act of mercy and courage, they had seen it all, and now they watched as I welcomed her into glory. Not as a guest, but as a daughter. I led her down streets of gold, through a kingdom she had only dreamed of. There were people waiting, those she had loved and lost along the way, but her eyes stayed on me. That's how she had lived, and that's how she would begin her eternity. And then I showed her what she had never seen before. I opened the book of her life, not the pain, not the struggle, but the redemption. She saw how each moment of fear had birthed courage. Each tear had watered someone else's breakthrough. Each miracle had unlocked another's faith. The storms, the cancer, the gunman, the failing heart, they were not the end. They were the evidence. She hadn't just survived. She had testified, and heaven sang. She worshipped like never before. No more weariness, no more weight, only joy. The kind that never fades, the kind that I had always promised, because now she could see it. Every no to death had been a yes to purpose. Every rescue had been my hand writing a bigger story. And now the story continues in those she left behind. In the prayers she prayed that still hover over her children. In the strangers she touched, the faith she spread, the legacy she planted. Mary didn't leave an echo, she left a living fire. Her chair on earth sits empty now. Her voice no longer speaks in the room she once filled. But she is not gone. She is home, with me, and I'm still telling her story, because death never wrote it. I did. I am Jesus Christ. And from the moment Mary took her first breath in that quiet Texas hospital, I was there, watching, guiding, shielding her through every danger, every sorrow, every storm. Her life was not left to chance. Every rescue was my hand, every heartbeat was my will, and every day she lived was a page I had already written. She did not die early, she did not leave too soon. She left on the exact day, in the exact month, in the exact year I chose, not a moment before, because I alone hold the keys to life and death. And when her final breath came, it was not the end, it was the beginning of her forever. Now she lives in my arms, in the place I prepared for her before the foundation of the world. She is home, wrapped in eternal peace, her story complete in time, but alive forever in glory. No more pain, no more tears, only joy, only me. I am faithful. I am sovereign, and I never stopped loving her, not for 1 second, and I never will.